All right, good evening, everyone. I believe we are recording and streaming our budget workshop meeting today. Just so everyone is aware, we are going to be saving this on our website. So if you are not able to make the whole thing, you will be able to find it there this week for that purposes. Our agenda tonight, Mr. Elder, is very simple. It is to review the next phase of the budget that Kevin has been preparing for all of us this evening, and then to answer any questions or receive comments on anything maybe we've heard up until now, or after the fact of that. So I don't know, Mr. Elder, I can turn it right over. Monica, can you make Kevin a co-host so he can share his screen? And
yes, and just so you know, there's something, the streaming hasn't started, so I will I'm just gonna do my best to get that going. I'm not sure why, but it's not streaming yet on YouTube. So I'm gonna work on that in the back end.
Okay. We are recording it. Also, for my board members, it is very windy out, and usually with wind could come power outages or obviously no internet. So if that does happen in your area, we'll know because you'll no longer be on the screen. And then Bill, because we right now only have 5 of you, if one were to drop off, we wouldn't have a quorum. So we would have to just, if it wasn't you that dropped off, we would have to just see if we should pause or postpone if that were to happen. But I'm gonna have to think good thoughts. Down here in my basement, it's not windy, so I think I'm hoping to be successful on my end.
All right, shall we turn it right over to Kevin?
Sure. Oh, maybe it's Kevin that's having technical difficulties.
Oh, here we go. I can share it.
There he is.
Can you see it now? Can you see the screen?
No.
All right, try again like I know what I'm doing.
I mean, I have it, Kevin, if you need me to share it.
Is that it now?
There it is.
Okay, great. So this is just the second presentation. More information will come, mostly final numbers from the state. And just as a reminder regarding the schedule, today's March 1st. We're doing the budget workshop. The state controller wants our tax cap that was due today. I submitted that, I guess about 10 days ago. So we're all set with that. In a couple of weeks, we'll have another board meeting. We can give some more updates as needed. And March 29th, we have another workshop scheduled. If we need that, that's available. April 19th, we're scheduled to adopt the budget. And then all this leading to the budget presentation on May 5th. And then, of course, May 18th is the budget vote itself. I had to make a slight change to the tax cap. The only real number that changed was BOCE's capital expenses. When I did that at the last meeting, that was just my best guess at the time. Since then, I've gotten the actual numbers. So the tax cap went from 2.2% to actually 2.31%. It made a slight change, not significant. The number that you see there, the 2.3%, that's what I submitted to the state controller. Breaking the budget down by categories, Board of Education, everything is flat. These are just, membership dues, some of the district meetings, et cetera. So really not seeing any major changes in that. These are the salaries, of course, are based on established after we have the budget vote in May, but we just have an estimate at this point. Here in for finance, what I've also was able to include, what we talked about for a while now, is adding a human resources generalist. So what I did was I put that in this budget under the business administration, the 1310 code. So it makes it a little bit artificially higher because also what I did was I included not only the salary but all the benefits. I just rolled it all into one code just to make it a little bit easier, depending on what the board wants to do with it. But so that's why there's 6 FTEs instead of 5 FTEs. That's the assumption for there. Public information, certainly this year has probably never been as important as it has been this year. We get that, Monica, we get her through Cap Region BOCES, and really it's pretty stable. You know, this category is pretty stable from one year to the next.
One of the things, if you recall, with our public information service is Monica's with us 0.8 days of the week, or 0.8 of the time with us. So that's basically about 4 days a week. Obviously, her office is also in our district for other things, so we're able to use that. But one of the pieces that I really enjoy about the service, and again, we have not planned on any type of increase right now for next year, is the extra hours. And so when we want to do videos, or we want to have conversations on different things, or different pictures, etc., we use those hours for that. So to talk with Cap Region on this, so that way we know if they're changing their services at all, but we are obviously continuing to be quite happy going through Cap Region.
Central services, this is mostly the people who do the cleaning for us. And this again is pretty stable. We have a staff of 30 people. And with the COVID supplies, that's been a huge increase this year, not surprising. And that was not really budgeted for last year. So that money is really coming out of the CARES Act. You know, this time last year, we really didn't know what we needed or didn't need for it. And yeah, so really it's a pretty stable, stable budget from one year to the next.
Kevin,
Yes, sir.
quick question.
Mhm.
Because we don't know the unknown, are we budgeting for additional, hand sanitizers, things like that, just to be on the safe side?
We have so much of that.
Huh?
So actually, it's a good question, Bill. Actually, what we did, because we were so fast and furious ordering last year, what we've done is taken the old admin center and consolidating all of the supplies out of that. Because, the issue was all the buildings were hoarding.
Yes.
Now we have a much, and this is where Ed Potter has really been a big help. He organized all of that, so when the buildings need something, they have to get it out of the admin center. So we have to short answer your question, we have a much better handle on supplies, PPE, etc.
Hopefully we won't have to
Yeah.
dip into it too much next school year.
No, and we have enough face masks, to last the next 2 pandemics.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. So this is just, I know you're familiar with all of this. We're a big district. We've got a lot of buildings, and we have 30 people that cover it. And, of course, with the capital project, Ballard, the high school, they've gotten bigger also. During this year, you can see we had 4 COVID cleaners. These were temporary people who were hired specifically just for this year. And then we have the COVID supervisor, which is Ed Potter. my intent was not to use them again next year. I have put in a little bit of money for a COVID cleaner if we need it, but I'm hoping that we're not going to need it. Kind of addressing the concerns that you were talking about before, Bill.
Okay.
But so that will, yeah. And actually, what's happened is a couple of the COVID cleaners have become permanent cleaners.
Mhm.
So that's actually been a nice bonus.
Very good.
Oh, and I should say, having Ed Potter this year has been a huge help for Stefan, who was new in the position this year.
Mhm.
So that's, it helped me, it helped Stefan. It's one of the COVID wins that's really just made the position a lot smoother. This is our maintenance staff, which is building and grounds, the guys who do the repairs. The big change here, and I think everyone's familiar with it, is we got our own snow plows this year
Yes.
in January. And as you can see, the equipment cost went up $42,000, but contractual expense went down $42,000. And so what that is we're not paying someone to snowplow for us. We're using that money 7 years to pay for the equipment. And the expectation is the equipment will last about 20 years. And then, of course, that'll be savings. So right now, we're not saving any money as a district, but what we are getting is much better parking lots. I think Christine will swear to that in court. And what it also does is gives her the assurance that the parking lots will be clean if we're going to have a 2-hour delay, whereas that was always a problem in the past.
I think, Audrey, in the budget last year, we had budgeted for a small amount of this, which helped us for this year because we knew that this was the rate we were going to. We just did it a little bit quicker than maybe what we anticipated for that. But I'm very appreciative because our maintenance and buildings and grounds people, they, really want to do it on their own, and take on that component, which definitely helped with the success of the plowing this year for that. And again, that's that stability piece. But I did see that, Kevin, you put a picture of the snow plows in here. I mean, I think that when you talk about snow plows, I'm not quite sure until you actually see them, just how big of a change this is for us when all we had were the trucks prior to this year. And so, even doing our own was a struggle at times, in this purpose. And now we have these grand snow plows for that. But I think for me, one of the things I'm appreciative of is that the out of the box thinking that Stefan, our new supervisor, has done. And these are the kind of conversations that we need to have with fresh eyes. So that way, when we talk about reallocating funds, it happens on the instructional and the non-instructional side of the house. And really, over time, this was, it's a gigantic win for not a ton of more money. Just thinking about the problem differently. I know Kevin and Stefan continue to have conversations around that type of thing where it's, okay, how can we do things smarter, not necessarily more costly, but in, with a new fresh set of eyes.
And what I will just piggyback off what Christine said, speaking with Stefan about it, first of all, when I asked them, I don't mind telling you all, when I asked them to, just give me a couple of pictures so I could show the school board, they went out and power washed the machines. They have a lot of pride in them. And and with that, I will say snow removal has been a big cultural win for us as a district, as a department, because now the maintenance, the custodians, and the groundsmen are all working together as a team. And they have a common, it's tangible. This is one of the most cooperative efforts that we've seen them. And what they told me is now after a few snows, everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it, et cetera. And so, like I said, it's just been very, very good. for us, and for not costing the district anymore, but getting better results, to me, is just an increase in value. The follow-up to that, and again, I think you know this better than I do, we're a big district and we have a lot of land. And so this is just, a picture of the high school itself, and you can just, I think that, one building gets a sense of how much land we're talking about. And this is 10 staff members, and that's including Stefan as well as Jim, who does most of the requisitions, et cetera. So really, for 200 acres, it's, 8 people doing a lot of work. And so the grounds guys spend a lot of their winter fixing up the equipment. And then, of course, as soon as the snow stops, they don't stop. It's hard just to keep it. As you know, it's probably hard enough to keep your own lawn.
Yes.
Grass cut. Imagine having to cut all of this. And this just gives you, some indication of all the things that they are responsible for. I'm certainly not going to read the list to you, but it's, it's a lot of responsibility that they have. And for me, this has been a big change coming here. As a district, we don't subcontract, or we subcontract very little. Our maintenance staff do their own electrical, do their own plumbing, the heating and air conditioning. It's a big deal to have people that have the abilities that can do it. And again, we're talking as a district, not only what are we doing this year, but trying to think years into the future, the manpower that we need, the skill levels, et cetera. We're already in, we want to get in touch with BOCES because, a lot of times they have their CTE programs, their, apprenticeship programs. Is there any reason why we can't hire some of those people, right when they come out of school?
Sure.
So Stefan is trying to get some of those efforts.
When I look at the slide, when we talk about these things, I almost added our own little box specific to this year. But it's really not specific to this year because once again, this group of people, have just thought out of the box. And so, through COVID, we've had as I always say, bleed money, spend money on certain things in order to keep the doors open. But other things like partitions that were quite costly in the beginning, they learned how to make and create that met all the requirements. They took the requirements very seriously and only brought forth information that we knew we could follow based on the regulations. And I said, I said just now that I wanted to make it for only this year, but I think this is one of the conversations that we need to have as a district from this year to next year of what things do we need to put in place to get all of our students 6th through 12th grade back. And how can it meet the requirements, but at the same time, continually try to get our kids back in school full time for that. And we're going to need those same conversations to take place with them, whether it's the end of this year or over the summer, with a goal that we have to be back K-12 full time, as long as we meet the Department of Health requirements. But they do a lot of that thinking with us.
Yeah, they do. So this is just general support services. The insurance cost, for budget purposes, I raised it just with the assumption that insurance costs were going to go up. I didn't have a specific number, but since then we are using a new insurance broker. It's the same insurance company, but a new insurance broker. What he did was he did a tour of the buildings, all the grounds. Ed Potter took him around, and it turns out we had some things that weren't insured, that should have been insured, like our scoreboard. And with it, basically giving us the same cover, actually giving us better coverage, more specific coverage, we'll be able to, as a district, save about $16,000, and it'll still be the same insurance company. So, in my mind, that's a pretty good win. And what he does is he comes to the district a couple times a year, basically just to do a survey. What's new in the district? Have you added anything? as you would know, we get two new snow plows. Are they covered for insurance? That sort of thing. You buy new snow plows, your first reaction is not to, oh, let me call my insurance agent. Transportation is pretty stable in terms of salaries, equipment, etc. So, yes, there's a slight increase, but not mostly that's due to salaries. But I do want to talk a little bit about the transportation department. As you can see, we've been pretty stable at the bottom with our bus drivers and staff, but their requirements have just keep increasing. And so I just wanted to illustrate a few points with that. This is the requirements to be a school bus driver. And as you would imagine, requirements are consistently added. I've never seen where they actually get rid of requirements. They just keep adding to the list, and it just becomes more and more that needs to be done.
It's a nice reminder that it's not just the driving of the bus.
No, it's a big deal. And I will say that the bus drivers take it very seriously. And I do like to remind the bus drivers that they're the first period in the day and they're the last period in the day. They are part of the school. And this year in particular, seating charts and all that sort of stuff have never been. They were always important, but now it's even more important, for obvious reasons. And I have to admit, I guess I always thought of the bus routes as, what you and I think of as the bus route. They come and they get, 40 kids, take them to school. And that's a big part of it, but there's so many of the special runs that go on top of it. And so, with half days, et cetera, you can see that even in COVID, we're still increasing our runs. So we have the special runs, athletics, field trips, et cetera. There's a lot that go into it. So about 70 students are transported out of our district, various programs, parochial schools, et cetera. We're responsible for transporting them. And this is an increase. Last year it was 55 students. This year it's 70 students. I don't know if that's COVID related or not. And now it's 19 locations, whereas last year was 18 locations. So again, Fred is always having to figure out how to do more with less. And as you know, getting bus drivers is probably the single biggest, hardest position to fill. We're always, everybody's always scrambling when it comes to bus drivers. The special runs that I was mentioning before, a lot of these are BOE, CTE programs, et cetera. This year, we didn't have tutoring and we didn't have the half day at the high school. My assumption is that next year when COVID restrictions are relaxed, those will be brought back as well. So yeah, it's always more and more. Starting about 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember, we have to transport homeless students. And so what the requirements say is if the student is in our district and they wind up homeless in another district, it's our responsibility to transport them to the district. And just to put a little wrinkle in that, what they determine is what's in the best interest for the student. So for instance, if, they wind up, say, in Gloversville, and the student is in 11th grade and, it's kind of a far drive to get from Gloversville to here, but you're in 11th grade, you built relationships, et cetera, you're probably going to continue coming to our school. If you're in first grade, do you really want a first grader on the bus that long? And they haven't really established a relationship. So maybe it's in the student's best interest to be in Gloversville. But it's not what's convenient for the district. It's not what's convenient for transportation. It's what's best for the students. And that's the rationale. We do get transportation aid based on mileage. You can see for the last number of years, it's been pretty stable in that 750,000 mile mark. Last year, not surprising, there was a huge drop. I'm not sure at this point what that means for our transportation aid, because we have a third less miles. Last year they were telling us go ahead and deliver lunches, deliver homeworks. Don't worry about your aid, we'll take care of it. And then of course they said, oh, well, we can only pay aid when you're transporting students, not when you're transporting lunches. So they're working that out, but that's going to be another consideration for us as a district. We're trying to stay on our replacement schedule, and so Fred wants to use the larger buses. They give us a little bit more flexibility for really not a lot more in cost. They have the compartments underneath, they help with sports, etc. And but so it's a combination. So we're leaning more towards the 72 passenger buses, but the drivers seem to like the 66 passenger buses too. So that's the struggle. So right now, this replacement schedule is about $25,000 less than last year's. But you always do want to keep on your replacement schedule. You don't want to fall too far behind. As I mentioned, we do get a fair amount of aid. Our aid ratio is almost 70%, and it's based on the capital expenses of buying the buses. That's reimbursed over 5 years, as well as the mileage, etc. And it's based on allowable pupil miles, but don't worry about that too much. Another huge portion of the budget is the employee benefits. So ERS is not our teachers. Pretty much everybody who's not teachers or teaching assistants. As a district, we have to contribute for that. The rates have gone up. That's again, New York State sets those for us. We have no control over this.
Under 39,000.
Teachers' retirement is a similar system. And that too, the rates have gone up a little bit. My recommendation to the board is that this is a year that we can help fund the TRS reserve. Historically, TRS has been about 11%. For the last few years, it's been below that. So when the rates are below 11%, my recommendation is to fund the reserve. When the rates are above 11%, we can use the reserve, and the goal is to try and keep that pretty expensive line item as stable as possible. This is a new reserve. I think the board knows it came about 2 years ago. And then, of course, the district is also responsible for Social Security and Medicare, which is 7.65% of wages. Workers' compensation is actually pretty flat. That's based, we're self-funded, and it's based on our estimated salaries, and we should be pretty stable from 1 year to the next. And unemployment insurance, for us, it's based on our unemployment claims, and again, we're thinking that should be fairly level for this year. And disability insurance, again, as a district, we're a pretty safe place to work, so it's pretty fairly low for that. And health insurance, of course, is seems to only go up and up. I guess it was last year. Was it last year, Christine, that the district introduced the HRA plan?
We've had it. We've had it in the contract, but we were able to bring people in to have it more as a big conversation. So we did have many people move to the HRA, and this is exactly why we did that, because the health consortium has decided what the percentages are, and that greatly helps us.
So, we're always trying to control it. But it is a big, it's a big moving target. And it's fluid. So as a matter of fact, I show that there's 577 participants. That's between employees and retirees. Actually, I just looked at the bill again this morning. 2 people have been added, so it's actually 579. So, it's always changing. So it's a difficult number to get exact. The bond anticipation notes. This is based for the school buses, and again, this is pretty stable. So the $25,000 decrease that I talked about, that won't be affected until the following year. Yeah, so here's the one that I'm looking for, debt service. This is the one that's probably going to be the single biggest issue for us. It's $1.7 million, and I'm also recommending the TRS reserve. So you can see that there's a huge increase in the intra-fund transfer. We knew this was coming about because of the capital project. So this is going to make our budget increase tremendously, but I don't think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the taxes, only because the building aid is going to meet it. So the debt service is increasing 1.7 million, but the building aid is increasing 1.64 million. So that's kind of balancing itself out. And so as a summary to the budget, and I know this is a huge increase, and a lot of that has to do with the building project that we've been planning for. So the budget has increased to $64 million. Revenue, lucky for us, because of the federal stimulus, and that's not counting the one that's in Congress at the moment. What they're telling the state is, yes, New York State, we're going to give you all of this extra money, but you have to use it to supplement your state aid, not to supplant it. My thinking is it's going to be supplanted. So because last year we budgeted for a 10% decrease in state aid, and in actuality, the state aid didn't decrease. So, this year we're actually in pretty good shape. And so next year, as long as we have flat state aid, we'll actually be in pretty good shape. And so the tax levy would be a 1.7% increase, and that would balance the budget. And that's still below our tax cap, which is 2.3%. So we're actually, at this stage, I'm not seeing any real, we're not seeing a budget gap, which sometimes you are at this, this stage of the process. Is there any questions? I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
Kevin, I do, and it's really just moving forward. I'm seeing a healthy jump in budget here, 4.3 million, and a corresponding $5.4 million in revenue. You can't anticipate revenue doing that again next year, can you? Jumping like that?
No, but our budget's not going to increase that much either.
Okay.
Because we're basically at a new step because of the building project.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah, no, if we keep
it's a good
stepping up,
question. It's an excellent question.
revenue is not going to match that if we
no, and actually, really, and that's my concern. That's why, I keep harping on the TRS reserve. I have, this year will be fine because of the federal bailout, but I don't see the federal government bailing out the state 2 years in a row.
Right. And are we going to be prepared for that?
I think we're in pretty good shape. We're better than most people because of our reserves, and we're being pretty cautious. And I think Christine will agree with this. We're not letting people. It's like, what do you need to run your program, as opposed to, let's go to the tax cap. So. But I think our reserves are in pretty good shape, and that was another reason I wanted to increase our TRS reserve. I thought that was a great opportunity for us to take advantage of it for this year.
Okay, thank you.
We talked about human resources, and I guess
I can talk about this one a
Oh, I
little
guess
bit for you,
you probably
Kevin.
want to talk about this.
Yeah, sure. So I think that what, as we go through this process and we look at numbers, you're always cautious. And this is to your point, Roger, of you don't want to introduce anything that you can't have around for longer than a year. Can you go back, Kevin, for a minute to that transportation slide with the list of requirements of a bus driver?
Yeah.
Thanks. But I mentioned human resources last year, prior to us entering this. And then this year we seem to be, knee deep in all things HR. And what happens is we wind up having to have multiple people do things that one central place should really be doing that. And this slide always hits me every year, and we look at it from the transportation side and the driver requirements, but I look at it from the director of transportation side and say to myself, well, every time he is now having to drive a bus because we have somebody out or sick or somebody quit or we let them go, all of these things wind up taking the back seat because the urgency is to make sure we get the kids home safely. That means that we're not hiring new bus drivers and training them as fast as we would like because we're relying on our office staff of transportation to do many of these things. Now, sure, some of them they absolutely have to do, but some of these other things and the keeping track of it and the screening of them and the checking and all that really falls under human resources. And I'm using this example tonight because it happened to be in our slides, but I really could go through this with any department. We have over 500 employees, and right now central office kind of divides and conquers when it comes to all things HR. That becomes a problem because not only are we the ones that make the decisions on it, now we're the ones trying to explain it, and people don't always have faith in that. I have a list, and it's such an interesting piece of schools, because again, we're going slowly on this because we want to make sure for HR, if we add this, we can keep it, but also, we have certain expectations that need to happen pretty quickly, in this realm. And human resources can be a management confidential position where we work with Saratoga County to get somebody on from a list. And it can also be administrative, like as a pupil personnel person, where then they are also responsible with evaluations and things like that for that. Schools are very mixed when it comes to what the decision is. And quite honestly, I think it's just that they're always looking for the best person for the job. And then what are the needs of that position forward. So we've been having certain conversations with the county to start there on that management confidential side. But we've also been looking at or feeling out people on the administrative side as to, what the interest is there and what we can do with that to get it going in the right direction. So we do not have that finalized as of March 1st because, I really want to I want to take our time and do this the right way and not be sad that we rushed it for that. I think that I know one person on the, or maybe even two on the line that are probably would be as happy and do anything to get HR, and that's Tim and Kevin, because there isn't a day that goes by where an HR type of scenario or question comes up, and you're always in those positions of, well, I think this is right, and I think this is what I need to do, and I think, and usually I phone a friend from a neighboring district that's in HR, and they help us out at times with those things. So I do think, and I don't need to belabor this, but I do think this is definitely an essential piece right now. When we talk about changes in health insurance and, the difference between an HRA, our base plan is now the alt PPO for most things. When people retire, they want to know what that means, and all those things. So those components are there, for all of that. A couple other things that we continue to have conversations about, and the second bullet on the slide that we were at is community schools. And community schools is an ongoing conversation. It's not necessarily something that we will be adding, but I always want to bring it up. It's that idea that even right now, what we're doing every Friday, it's the idea that the school is a hub of the community and people look to the school to help support things. Our first step into this was, working with Saratoga Center for the Family for extra mental health counselors, and those ones in drastic need. And we're at, 2 full ones there. We do a little bit of community schools when we bring in dental, or we bring in, vision, or we bring in some of these things, but we're also a little scattered by it. And so I keep looking and watching for, what things in community schools are, or who is really having a bigger impact. And Hadley Luzerne is actually a school that has always, hired with Hudson Headwaters and as a remote site, and they have a physician's assistant, part-time that is housed in their buildings. And of course, it's always good for physicals and different things and getting ready for all of that. But it was also good right now when testing needed to happen and people weren't sure where to test for COVID and all those things. It was right there on site for the families. And so, it's building that trust in understanding that there's a lot going on. When I always think about community schools and why does South Glens Falls need to have this conversation, we're in Saratoga County, but if you cross 2 bridges, you're in either Warren County or Washington County. And so a lot of services are done by county, and yet we can't simply go a mile and get our services somewhere else all the time. And so for me, because we're that northernmost district in the Saratoga County, it's always good for us to look for that to make sure we have all the resources that our South Glens Falls people need. So, again, I don't envision us having future adjustments for the 2021 year, but I do think it's an important conversation for us to keep at.
Christine, it's just basically like a school-based health center.
It really is. It takes on, different avenues and feels, but yes, Bill, that's really where it is what is lacking in our area and how can we help make that bridge so it can be done at a more rapid pace for our students.
I think Hudson Headwaters has several of those too, don't they?
They do in certain schools, like I say, but for the most part, and again, we have, with Hudson Headwaters being our primary doctor, and obviously with the Moreau Center being open now, that's helped tremendously for South Glens Falls. But there's still that time factor, the discomfort factor, the fear factor of being, at a doctor's office rather than in a school and those kind of things. So really that's why it's also part of the conversation of that school-based health. Athletics really falls, and the idea of the athletic trainer kind of falls with this as well, because again, sports injuries, concussion planning, those kind of things, are all very relevant to this, and people are always looking for someone they know and can communicate with when their student, when their child has an issue. And so we did have a retirement in athletics in physical education this year. And so as we begin to look at that position, it allows us to think about all things athletics, including athletic trainers. Again, this is all over the place. Some schools have a contract with outside entities for athletic trainers. Others hire their own. Some are just certified in training, while others are certified to be a physical education teacher and athletic trainer. So I think, those components are still there and around. So there is more to come on that, but we did have that retirement. And so that's where, we're thinking about how do we utilize that in different ways if possible.
Christine, for the record, I pitched Bob Jones and it looks like he's staying.
Ah, darn it.
Sorry, I tried.
You tried. I appreciate it. I hope no one from Queensbury is on the line watching right now, because they'll be very mad at you, Roger, that you
don't give up on it, Roger. Keep going.
That's right.
No, actually, I was picking his brain for a bit, and I asked him, I said, so since you're a unicorn, athletic trainer and PE teacher, do you hang out with any other unicorns that you could recommend to us? So he's shaking some trees for us.
Yeah, it's always good to get into that group of people
Yeah.
and see what it is for that. Sensory rooms, I leave this on, and we've had conversations in the past because this was part of an impact of our budget as far as money goes in the past. And, always at the time of a sensory room, how many kids are really using it? What are the needs for it? And so on and so forth. And I think, again, this is all kind of community schools related, but when we talk about the mental health of our students, kindergarten through 12th grade, and what changes have been there and how they're reacting, things like sensory rooms really become more important than ever before, and how to utilize them appropriately. Obviously, right now, they're not a priority because of the way we would have to clean them, et cetera, but sometimes they're just necessary. And so this continues to be a conversation of, what do we need? What are those are we sustaining them, and what comes next for that? I always, as I know most of you as board members were here when we first started talking about dogs in schools, and we had to have a policy for that. So people could bring therapist dogs in, and Tim's dog visits and reads with kids in classes. And, you read the studies on that, again, that's a sensory piece of what a dog does to calm those things down. And unfortunately, the federal government told states that we need to 3-8 test this year. As a data person, not sure what the value of the data is. I say that very openly because I'm also big on data and big on making sure that we're practicing testing. So this is definitely with mixed emotions. I talk about that. But when I think about sensory rooms, or I think about therapy dogs, I think there's a bigger conversation, with our mental health task force or with some of our social workers on what we can do during those specific times of the year to ease anxiety for all students. And I think that will continue to be one of the things that we have to have conversations around. Just a couple other things. We had a retirement in music, and I think it's one of those interesting niches where people come with different expertise, which adds to the whole music program, whether it be band or orchestra or in the choral profession. And so we are going to be sitting down with our 2 instructional teacher leaders in this area to really talk about what the music schedules look like. Again, I look at this as a reallocation, not necessarily anything else, but I think it's important for us to review this at all times on that. And then, as I mentioned, we are always having the conversations on how we can bring back 6th through 12th grade students full time. As we were getting ready for this meeting, our budget workshop last year was one of the last in-person meetings that we had of the year. 1 year ago was the first thing I canceled on a Sunday night, was foreign travel, and now we still cannot go to those countries as Americans a year later for that. And then it's coming to the 1 year of being a part of this. And it's still surprising to me of where we are right now a year later. However, we've learned a lot in that year. And that's why I feel we can do really good out of the box thinking on how we can get our students back 6th through 12th grade and what opens up. As part of advocacy, we met with many of our representatives in the area for Lobby Day last week. And this was a big conversation for them. And when they had questions for us separate from what we might be talking about as far as advocacy goes, this was one of them. How do we get kids back in school in a safe place? And our numbers continue to show schools are a safe place. And so I think that becomes the key component of this as we're talking through things. Transportation will be one of the areas that we'll have to have the ongoing conversation about. So it was fitting that we talked about transportation tonight because as Kevin mentioned, we went from 144 to 157 runs, and that's actually after subtracting other runs. So we really probably jumped 20 runs in the amount of runs that we have, as opposed to the opposite way, just because we also got rid of some. And, right now the rules are very tough on transportation. And so how do we start having those conversations around what becomes, the best fit for busing. So I think that, we're definitely, it is March, 1 year, but I would say that we're not over an impact from the pandemic on our budget in the future. And so that's why, the reduction last year, the idea of moving reserves to making sure that we're at 4% of our of our fund balance. So that way we have the ability, if we need to use those funds, if other things come up or if new rules happen, in order to keep our doors open. And really that is the piece for this. That is the only way that we're going to feel successful in schools to get all of our kids back. I don't know I can't remember what the next slide is. Sorry. Nope, you can skip that one.
And so just going forward, right now, obviously we're under the tax cap. We're not making any major cuts. What I've done is I don't have the BOCE's final numbers at this point. So right now I've just assumed a 2% increase, and we'll see what those are. And then of course on the revenue side, we're waiting for New York State aid, what that'll be, including our building aid. And the federal stimulus, how that will shake out. Again, right now, we've been told that everything, all the state aid will be flat. So it's flat for 2019-20, flat for the 2021 year, and then flat for the 21-22 year. So next year's state aid will be the same as 2 years previous. But since 6 months ago we were talking about decreases in 10 to 20% decreases, I'm feeling pretty good about 0. And then of course, as a board, we'll have to establish, you'll have to establish the actual property tax levy.
For me, when we talk about the future pieces, obviously, we know that not only have we been having these conversations, but we have been involved in a merger study. And if anyone saw the meeting last week, it was all on finances. And we have a part 2 of finances coming up in March for that. The recording is online for anyone who is with us this evening or watching it at home. It gets a little bit into the weeds of numbers, but in the same sense, when we talk about budgets and future adjustments and what has to happen, we talk about that long-term effect, that's why we're in this merger study. Because if long-term, there's positive pieces for our taxpayers and our students in South Glens Falls, we have to be a part of the conversation. And so at some point, our budget conversations on this side and our conversations around why are we even looking at a merger study are going to become one and the same, because they will have direct impacts on each other as time goes on for that. So I do encourage anyone, if you're not necessarily somebody who is understanding of the merger, the last meeting really puts a lot of numbers together. And I hope that people continue to follow that as we go along and as the final reports come out on that. And then the last slide is all about what we're going to do to keep communicating this and using that piece. And so, obviously, as I talked about, we have advocacy efforts. We continue to do that. We will have as many workshops as we need. If there's one thing that I learned in the process of going out for a budget last year, while everyone was working from home, is that Zoom live streaming and conversations like this do work for busy people. And so I was very worried in the beginning that we wouldn't have conversations with enough people about what it means and what our budget is and what are the numbers. And I really believe the opposite happened because people were able to, quickly within a half an hour, be able to speak with us online. And so we will continue to, as we build that calendar of conversation, we will most definitely include in person, but also over one of these platforms for informational pieces on that. So that I think will be the biggest change of this communication conversation is, don't throw out something just because you were mad about it when it was happening, because I think it'll be a good conversation piece for our community to have that. Eventually, we will be creating our budget newsletter and sharing that. And when we get some final things out, we'll be sharing those pieces of information too. We try to put everything on the webpage that's related to budget at all times on that. So Bill, this meeting is always, you know, a short, we have some very long ones related to the budget, but in workshop mode, this one I knew would only be about an hour presentation. So I turn it over to you. I don't know if you specifically have questions or if anyone on the board has questions or thoughts that went through their head for that.
Just one little thing, Kevin, as I was thinking about this package that'll probably get passed this week in the Senate. Things I've seen is the money they're allocating for schools looks like it's going to be allocated out over the next several years. So I guess we need to keep that in mind if and what all will be impacted. They're only saying there's going to be like $6 billion this year, in addition to the $130 billion or whatever that still hasn't been spent yet. And then more monies again the year after next year and the year after that for a while.
Yeah, and you know, I certainly don't know the details of it, Bill, but I guess I'm just, you know, knowing human nature as it is, gets into the whole supplement supplant. You know, my concern will always be that, you know, the state will say, okay, well, since you're getting that federal money, we're going to cut back.
Yeah, excellent point, Kevin.
You know, so I'm not, I haven't counted on that. Certainly not in this budget.
Excellent point.
The other question, Bill, on that is how the money comes to us. Does it come from federal directly to schools, or does it come from federal to state and state to schools? Because that changes the conversation based on the pathway of the stimulus as well. So we'll all be watching for the devil in the details of any of that along the way.
Once it gets in the state hands, no telling where it's going to get shifted to.
Yeah.
Or for the government wise. I don't have any questions whatsoever. Does any board member present have any questions?
I had a question about the HR position, Christine.
Yeah.
I was curious, does the 1.7% that was just presented, does that include hiring an HR person?
Yes, it does.
Right now it does. Yep. We were able to put that in. Again, we're being conservative right now, and we are putting it in like it's a management confidential position. But so that's why, you know, it's still a conversation progress that it could affect it if we had to increase the plan based on who our applicants are for that.
Did you look at all into like outsourcing to an HR company and it was just not financially good?
So schools don't necessarily always downstate. There's a lot of that for certain things, but in upstate there really isn't. And one reason why is because schools are their own niche of HR. And especially like when you look at that list of things versus, you know, hiring and different certifications and things like that. And so people really have always tried to have their own in-house. Schools our size, some of them have 2 to 3 people in HR already. So we're a little behind in this area. And we're trying to start small to kind of get our systems in place for that. But, you know, obviously, you know, as Kevin talks, every time you have a retirement, especially in central office, a lot of that base knowledge goes that you're just used to having. And so, you know, we lost Audrey to retirement. We're happy for her. She comes in still helping us, smiling away. If she's watching tonight, yeah, stop smiling when you come see me. Okay? That's what I hope is happening. But you know, we also could have 2, if not more, other retirees in the business department over the next few years. That also brings that knowledge base that we take for granted. And some of those positions to fill, they absolutely will not have that same skill set. And so those are things that are on our mind as well when we do this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone else?
I just had one question about the, I mean, I know every year we get the buses, but I know in the past few years, we picked up a Suburban and was wondering if there's any feedback, because I know we talked about getting another one for those you know, 1 or 2 students going long distance instead of using a large bus?
So I think unfortunately, sometimes like in the ebb and flow of things, we wanted those, and now we're looking at the 72 and the 66 simply to try to keep our runs as manageable as possible with our numbers. And so I think that's why and again, I did not speak directly to Fred, but when I saw the proposal, that's where kind of his next need was. But I do think we'll, and then the truck, right, Kevin, there's a truck this year.
Yeah, so I can piggyback a little bit off that. Because I asked a question, you know, coming from New Lebanon, all of our special runs were Suburbans, but we were such a smaller district. And here, you know, so I asked a question, why don't we have more Suburbans? And he said, for, you know, essentially the same amount of money to get one of the small buses, what we call vans, and is it the same as a Suburban? And the small bus just gives you a lot more flexibility. So our small runs, you know, CTE programs, special ed runs and things like that, we tend to do them on the small buses because first of all, probably we can consolidate a few students with an aide, et cetera, for really what's essentially the same cost.
I was just curious. I know that when we first got the Suburban, we talked about possibly getting more, and I hadn't heard much on feedback.
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't there for those conversations, but you know, that's what Fred's told me. So, you know, maybe he had maybe the image was better than the reality. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, once they tried it and they figured out that the smaller bus better, then.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the logic of the Suburbans is, oh, okay, it's, you know, it's great, you know, especially with country roads and the 4-wheel drive, et cetera. But, you know, like I said, I asked the question when I first started several months ago, and yeah, he told me that he preferred the small buses.
I know up in Lake George, they got like a fleet of minivans. But whatever works for us, that's what works.
Yeah.
So our next conversation around the budget is our budget meeting coming up, which is on my daughter's 11th birthday, March 15th. And that will truly be the 1 year of us, unfortunately, having to close down for 2020, is that Monday for that. So we will be continuing the conversation of budget. And we also will have to go into executive session that night about some contract conversations. But with that said, you know, for me, the only other thing to report to the board is that we were able to use Ballard Elementary School last week as a vaccination site for Saratoga County Schools because we've been using Ballard Road BOCES for that. And Tim actually took part in it the first time, and you know, he kind of shared with me on Saturday, and he could probably put it better in his own words, but when you go through all these conversations, and they've been tough ones for our community, and you know, as I talk about with 6th through 12th grade still isn't back full time, and how do we get this to happen, and what do we do, and how do we get it right for our students, you know, being a part of that piece on vaccinations has really meant a lot because it makes you feel like we're giving back. And though these clinics are devoted to anybody in education because the really belief is the more we get people vaccinated in schools, the easier it is for all of us to open up. And so I'm very appreciative to Jim Dexter and our BOCES personnel because they really kind of took the lead on this and did those things for us. And then you know, we've been a part of it in some small way, and now using our school as we do second vaccinations in one area and first vaccinations in another. So we did 400 at Ballard last Friday, and I think that Tim is going to volunteer to do 320 with me again this Friday.
Yes, my feet have finally recovered from running back and forth between the library and the cafeteria. But I think, you know, what stuck out for me the most is that this is a process where people, there are a lot of robot blocks for people to do it on their own, especially older folks, you know, people who don't have access to computers, don't spend a lot of time on computers. This is a heavily technology-based process that the state has put into place. And so just simply being able to have a team of people there to troubleshoot, and in some instances, just kind of sit in the place of the person at the computer and just kind of be their scribe for them. It was, 5 hours of running around, but I felt I felt finally like I had been able to do something that made a difference. And I think there was people from pretty much every school district in Saratoga County there volunteering to help. I mean, it really was quite an undertaking. And I think everybody just feels like we all just want to be able to feel like we're moving things forward. And that really helped us to feel that way. So yes, I will be there on Friday.
Nice. I got him to volunteer online for everyone to hear. So that makes me happy for that. I think one other conversation that continues to come up when we talk about things is our admin center. As Kevin talked about right now, it's a housing component for certain things related to COVID, but it's also our spot where we still have our capital project people in because we were able to, save some money with some of those things on that. So as we get into the summer and reopen again, we will be looking at what our next steps are with that building and how we can either sell that or reutilize it in different ways, and we'll come with proposals for that. So that's we thought it would be a 2021 conversation, but as all things right now, we've had to delay a little bit, which is fine, and it will be part of the 21-22 conversation.
Christine, I also would like to thank you for taking the lead and getting those vaccination clinics there on behalf of Saratoga County and our school district. And that was, I think, just very solid on your part for our school.
The Department of Health, Dr. Kuehl's and Department of Health, the partnership has really been great. And so, we'll keep doing them if they keep giving us the vaccines. And so, I wish more counties across the state were working it this way, because I do think, it will continue to help by us doing it. So thanks, Bill. So that's all I have this evening. I don't know, Bill, if you have anything else. And like I say, the next meeting's March 15th.
No, I'm great, unless any other board member has anything.
Good.
If not, thank you for the presentation.
Yep. So at this time, we will stop recording and the live stream will be off. This is only a workshop, but usually we do have the public there. So if there are follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or our administrative assistant, Barb Pease, because the board still always wants to hear if there are questions along the way, and we'll share all of those on the March 15th meeting. Thanks, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Christine?
Yes, I'm stopping.